Well, who's on first?
Yeah.
Go ahead and talk. Who? The guy on first.
Who?
The guy playing first base.
Who?
The guy on first.
Who is on first?
What are you asking me for? I'm asking you.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Who is on First? Who's on First? Thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate you. I am Tim Ellebrook, as always. That's Brian Kaplinger and Michael Ramsey. Somewhere in the blurry distance he is. Again, thank you guys for listening. Please like, follow, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff on our socials. Before we get started, we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. Some rivalry stuff with the Cardinals and the Cubs happening this weekend. Some CBA stuff. But before we get started, how are you guys doing? Michael, how is your voice? Are you still alive?
Yeah, I'm still alive. Voice is still kind of coming back. Much like the Cubs, really went through a really tough stretch, but seem to be coming out of it now. So
That's pretty good. I like that.
I know. Look at him. He's just tying it in on there, making a nice little bow. I can't give him a hard time. I feel bad for him now as he can't yell back at me for the whole Astros series that they went through. And plus, they're winning some games now, and tonight's rubber match is always going to be fun. But man, it's been good. Good week. As we keep saying, I'll keep saying it. Good baseball makes for good weeks, and we've had a lot of good baseball. Even if you tuning in a little bit earlier today, the Yankees put up a 13 spot in the third inning on the Athletics. I mean, that's a rough day in Sacramento, boys.
Man, what a ballpark for Aaron Judge and Ben Rice. Just imagine a playoffs, a wild card series or something in Sacramento with that offense.
I can only
Love to
hope.
see it.
You gotta see it once in your lifetime, right?
Watch that happen, but then MLB step in and be like, "No, we're not going to do this here. Your home field's going to be
San
Houston
Francisco
or something stupid crazy."
Right.
Yeah, right.
we know they're
The
not going to
worst
be using
place
it.
of all time.
You're right.
Chicago too.
We'll send you to Anaheim. They're not playing for anything.
Yeah. All right, boys. So I thought it would be kind of fun, just as we're recording Sunday night, as the rubber match is going to happen. So we don't know by the time this comes out, the game's going to be decided. But I thought it'd be kind of fun just to talk about two things, some moments from the last two games that we thought were really funny that stuck out, and then something I want to hear from you guys is just over your guys' history watching the game and being fans. Like, what are some moments growing up that you remember of a specific Cardinals-Cubs series? Because I've got a couple. So let's just start out with moments from this. I thought the game Saturday night, honestly, as a Cardinals fan, losing sucked, but I really thought it was amazing how PCA doing everything that he did and just playing into it, not going too far like he did the first time, but just like taking it, responding. His little sellies he did on second base. I thought it was fantastic. And as much as I hate the kid, as a baseball fan, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
My big question is going to be: is he going to get fined or suspended like Uribe is in Milwaukee for his nice little gesture that he did towards the Cardinals as well?
I don't know. I feel like he should have gotten fined, but I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think it's kind of a two-play thing. I mean, look at what the boys in San Francisco are doing out there. So if you shut that down there, it's going to be kind of an epidemic. I think it's a little bigger there with Uribe, purposely right towards the Cardinals dugout. I loved it. I think the Cardinals should have responded in some sort of way. But I think it's good for baseball whenever goofy stuff like that happens. PCA, the response last night was unbelievable. I was not sure I believed in the power of the tarps off fellas, but last night sitting there in the stadium, listening to those boys chanting overrated, and then watching the pitch and PCA sending one deep into Busch Stadium, I was like, boys, they may be onto something. They got PCA fired up.
Yeah. I thought what was funny from that too is the fan that caught the ball was a Cardinals fan, and he wanted to throw it back, but his throw was so awful he hit a fan in the front, and it
That's
happened to be a
incredible.
Cubs fan who then kept the ball.
That's incredible. See, that's the
He's
stuff
like,
when you're live at
"Oh,
the
come
game
on,
you
bro,
don't
try
see.
a little harder."
That is incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're gonna throw it back, you got to make sure you have the arm to at least get it back in there. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
Yeah, it's a good, honestly, first two games. I hate the fact that the run differential is so in favor of Chicago from those two games just because we let them come back so much. But it was great to see home runs from the Cardinals in the first game, and I was talking to Brian before we started, like there's something to when this team homers, they have such a better chance to win because they're not stringing hits together right now. Um, but it's a good set of two games, and it was honestly also 2-1 note, and I'll let you guys go. The Busch Stadium broke 40,000 for the first time this year outside of opening day, which also superseded last year. So there's something exciting happening for sure.
Yeah, and Michael, I'll let you talk here for a minute because you said you were there last night, so you got to experience like the fullness of the crowd. There's something about Busch Stadium. I think any big stadium when it's full like that, especially during the rivalry moments, and I think what makes it even more exciting for this, as you said, Tim, both games I've really enjoyed, but some of that is because both teams are in the mix. They're not necessarily playing great, but they're playing strong games. They're playing to their game styles, which is fun to watch. I think, game one in this series on Friday night was obviously a lot of fun for Cardinals fans because they won, but then also you see Nelly Velasquez come up and literally the first pitch he sees after Happ had hit a 3-run bomb, he just responds with that. And I mean, how much fun is that like in baseball regardless? And then obviously you get to see like Sagasi getting his big home run, and those things are always fun. But last night, like I said, it was a blast. The game was close early and started, you could tell it was starting to get away from the Cardinals a little bit as it kind of went on. And again, a lot of credit. I'm not a big PCA fan, but big players rise in big moments, and maybe that is something that can get him going for the rest of the season, just having a moment like that. Because Michael, you and I were talking at church earlier today, like last night he hit the ball hard in every at bat. Yep. And it was just one of those things, as you were watching, you knew that was coming at some point. You just kind of hoped he would hook it foul, like he'd get his pitch and miss it. But he did not. And to his credit, again, how much fun is that, when you're at the ballpark or you're watching on TV, regardless of the Cardinals losing or not, that type of energy, that type of environment, that style of game is just fun to be a part of and watch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, just looking at it, PCA's homer was 114 off the bat. Look at that.
That's the hardest hit ball he's ever hit in his career. I was reading earlier today.
For real?
Yeah, that's what I was reading earlier today. Didn't check the numbers, but that's what I had read earlier. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, no,
right.
Like Brian said, being there last night and watching on TV is great, but being in person to watch those games, it's special. We've all seen several games in person throughout our lives, but Cubs Cardinals hits different. Part of that is, obviously you guys being Cardinals fans, I'm sure you love going to the ballpark and it's just, Birds fans everywhere. But like last night, it's not a 50-50 mix, but 60-30 or 60-40, somewhere in that mix, split. And so like when PCA hits his home run last night, half the stadium or more, goes completely silent. And then the rest of the stadium just erupts and stuff. Like it's beautiful to watch. I've said it several times, even on here. The Cardinals and Cubs both being good at the same time is really good for baseball. Because the Cubs-Cardinals rivalry is, right up there, arguably with the Yankees-Red Sox, especially in different stretches of different eras. But the Cubs-Cardinals, I mean, it doesn't matter if one team's playing elite ball and the other one's not. It's almost always a good series. And to have both teams actually playing very good baseball right now, and both teams, potentially having a shot at the playoffs with the way they are playing right now, I think it kind of raises the atmosphere up too. And you have both teams are kind of coming off of a bit of a tough week. And the Cubs, it was a tough 2 weeks. But both teams are kind of coming into this series really needing some wins, and I think you've kind of seen that too. Both teams have played a little gritty throughout different portions of this. As a Cubs fan, obviously, when Ian Happ hit that 3-run homer in the first inning of that first game, I'm like, sick. Here we go. Cardinals killers in the building. We're going to step on these boys' throat tonight. And then your young boy steps up right away and just puts one out in the first inning. I'm like, well, never mind. Never mind. We're probably going to lose this one. So, but yeah, it was beautiful.
I don't know about young boy there.
He's young compared to, some, I guess. But yeah, it was beautiful to watch last night. Ben Brown was absolutely lights out. It was really cool to get to see him pitch. This is his third year up in the bigs, but he's really been kind of hit or miss throughout his first 2 years. He went to the bullpen this year and really kind of found something, it appeared. But their ultimate goal was to stretch him back out into a starter. And he's kind of been flexed into that role because of injuries more than anything. But he's really done a fabulous job since moving over to a starter. And they've been smart about the way they've handled it. They haven't tried to stretch him out in every game. Even games where he's looked really solid, they've shut him down in 4 or 5 innings. But last night, he really was kind of commanding the zone. Like Tim said, there was just something about his fastball last night that was like the guy's throwing straight heat, and the Cardinals couldn't find it. So it was like, I don't know, it's just the way the ball was moving. Obviously, that is the one thing on TV versus live. You can actually see that ball a little better on TV, how the movement and stuff looks than where I was sitting behind the dugout. But, it was beautiful to watch. The guy was really taking control of things. And I was telling Brian earlier, it was a bit of a laughter and also a baseball moment. I was sitting there, and there's a young guy right behind me in the 4th inning. He's sitting there, and he's like, Mom, we really need to get a hit. He's got a perfect game going. I'm like, shut up, kid. We don't say that.
Yeah.
It was
You don't know the rules,
whoever
man.
you are out there,
Come
great
on.
job. Great job. Talk about it.
It was
That makes
unreal.
me think there was another broadcast game I was watching, and I forget which team it was, but there was a perfect a no hitter going, and the announcer was like, "Well, there's no hitter going. We don't need to say anything." And then the color guy was like, "No, we need to jinx that as much as possible right now."
Brutal.
Oh, I think we lost Michael. Are you there?
I can hear you, boys,
Maybe,
but you can't
maybe
hear
not.
me.
Maybe so. He'll come back at some point. No, one thing I was thinking about Brian Michael's on his way back. I'm sure he'll come back.
He'll jump
Yep,
back
this
in.
is beautiful.
He with Ben Brown, something I thought was interesting. Last year we played against him in Wrigley. I think it was that 4th of July series. We pegged him for like 4 or 5 runs in that game. But in the same time this year we couldn't do anything with him. The difference, I do know he added a sinker to his repertoire, so it played off a bit. I don't know what the pitch count of like what he threw, how many pitches. Maybe I could see that real quick.
I know it wasn't he didn't hit 100. He was in probably the 6th, early 7th with like 75, 78 pitches. So,
yeah. So he threw 14 sinkers, 33 four-seamers. I know if I was, to overanalyze and couch this, they were chasing his four-seamer and they were hitting it really, really early. They were trying to be really aggressive, but they could not. They couldn't square it up correctly. So maybe the movement changes. Maybe I should have figured that out and did the research on it.
I think it's a product of a lot. You're right. And you got to give a lot of credit to Brown. He pitched really, really well. He's been doing that as of late anyway for the Cubs. But some of the, the difference too is the Cardinals knew his game plan was to get out ahead of them. He is a big first pitch fastball pitcher. And they wanted to try and capitalize on it. I didn't hate the game plan. I think it was just unfortunate that like you said, they weren't squaring him up. And whether or not that was just they didn't see him well or the movement was just getting it off the barrel of the bat, it did its job. And so, again, ton of credit to Brown. I think, him kind of, you would have liked to seen maybe the second time through the lineup from the Cardinals being a little bit more patient, maybe getting a few more pitches out of him. But really, by that point, he had kind of already settled into a rhythm, and it wasn't like you were going to get him out of that. And so it's like you either take your hacks at a good fastball, or chances are you're going to be down 0-2 before you even realize it.
Yeah, there was a quote from an interview with Weatherholt at the end of the game, how he talked about how he went up, I think it was his third plate appearance, so third time through the lineup for Brown. And he was like, all right, at this point, we should be at a pitch count of like 80 or something like that. And he looked up and he's like, oh, no, shoot, he's in the 50s.
Right.
Oh, crap. We got to figure something out.
Yeah.
So you could tell, and even Ollie said to a writer that they had a game plan to be really aggressive, get the ball out, and put it in play a lot, which Brown didn't strike out a lot. But, they just couldn't square it up. I would like to have seen, if I'm going to couch this to them, I would like to have seen them to change their plan and be like, okay, we can't square anything up one time through. We just need to work this pitch count and get this out of here. But I mean, it's one game of 162. We just keep going. The one thing that I'm tired of, though, man, I'm tired of seeing Herrera hitting double plays. Holy crap.
See, you got that, and I'm just tired of Gorman swinging over the top of everything. So,
yeah, I'm tired of that too.
I mean, that's just, it's one of those things. Again, when you look at what Brown was able to do, I mean, he leaned on his defense, and again, everybody in MLB knows. I mean, if you watch MLB or you're around the conversation points, the Cubs hang their hat on their defense. They're probably one of the best defensive teams in the game when you look all throughout their lineup. I mean, and there were some hits yesterday in that sense that I think against a lot of other teams, those balls are down. They're in corners, which would have, I think, shifted the way that game could have ended had some of those balls dropped versus that. Couple that with some Cardinals mistakes. I mean, they're in the later half of the game when you get a couple people on and Herrera tries to go first to third on the base hit and gets thrown out by Suzuki at third base for the second out. Like those are mistakes that you just can't have when you're chasing multiple runs. Like if you were down just one run, I understand the aggressiveness. I don't like it, but I can write it off. You're chasing 5 runs, I believe, at that point. You can't. You're too valuable, and your run's not going to win or tie the game. So there's no need to press that issue.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
So there were a lot of things like, again, some of that is a young team. They're still trying to figure some of those things out in regards to that. Herrera is notably, at least this year, if not his whole career, a very, free swinger, early swinger. It's just been unfortunate. Yeah, it seems like here recently, if there's somebody on base, he's going to ground it right to one of the infielders for a double play, and it has not been fun to watch.
Yeah, the one thing I've noticed, and it's been confirmed by multiple media personalities as well, but you can look at the numbers, his launch angle is down significantly.
Right.
And so everything he swings at, unless it's this hung slider or hung breaking ball, he's over the top of it and he's putting it on the ground, which in every other facet of his, even if you look at his Savant page or in his game, he is in an elite category. But it's kind of the Tatis issue. It's kind of the Tatis issue where that launch angle is keeping him from lifting stuff in the ball, but that's a really hard thing to change over the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be hard to, kind of adjust on the fly. I mean, we've seen him be able to hit the ball hard. It'll be interesting to see if he tries to stay a little bit further back. It seems like he's trying to pull the ball a whole lot, which I think, helps his power. But with that, he's early on some of his swings. And so obviously, if you watch any bat path, your bat's going to start to track back up, right? And so where he's starting to make contact with the ball, his bat's already on the rise. And you wonder if there's a way of a simple adjustment. I'm not saying he's going to do this, but you step up in the box or back in the box just a little bit so it changes where that bat is coming through the zone a little bit more. Because I don't necessarily want to see him change his swing because, I mean, he's hitting the ball hard. But at the same token, for a guy that you were hoping to see a little bit more power from, it is a little bit concerning on some levels. But at the same token, when you got a guy like Jordan Walker who seemingly has figured out the power, you can kind of relax a little bit on that. Now, I think as we get later in the season, if you don't have somebody else, if Herrera is not figuring it out and you don't have somebody else that can hit for a little bit more power, maybe that's the hope of having like someone like Velasquez come up, that he will provide a little bit more power in this lineup. Because as much as we want to play the Whitey ball style or, that small ball-esque era game, we're starting to get beat quite a bit when we cannot manufacture those runs where you need a swing of the bat to really change the game.
Yeah, I'd also say, like, we don't have enough players of that archetype to be able to do that correctly. If you look at Milwaukee, their entire 1 through 9 is all speedy, contact-oriented players. Even their superstars, Churio, and the other guys, they still have a lot of pop, but they're speedy-oriented contact. We have, 2 of those? You got to have a full roster. You can't compete in that style of game without a full roster of them.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll say this, and then we can jump into some other things too. Like you flip it on the other side. You look at the Cubs. One of the reasons why they're so streaky is because they have a lot of swing and miss in their lineup as well. I mean, that's just, they're going for the more power. So, you're going to see bigger games from them where if everybody's hitting, like you saw early in the season when they run off the 2 10-game win streaks, everybody seemed to be hitting. Yep. And then they lose 10 straight, and it was like nobody's hitting. Yeah. And now it seems like they're starting to middle out a little bit, and that's what you kind of hope for. The Cardinals, obviously, we're not going to be the top power profile team. I think we need to be consistently somewhere in the middle with the power. But our big issue, and you and I have talked about this, I think a lot of the media pundits throughout, the St. Louis area are talking about it too. We got to figure out the lineup from basically 6 down. 6, 7, 8, and 9 has got to produce to some degree. Maybe not every night, but they've got to have some consistency. Because for the first half or the first, third of this season, it's only been 1 through 4, and that is not going to be a recipe for going deep or being a part of the Central Division, especially as competitive as it is, if you're going to continue to do this.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so before we move on, welcome back, Michael. We're really glad you've made it back. And for any of those, we just made some cuts. We had some issues, but it doesn't matter. Who cares? I want to hear some of your guys's any memories or any core memories of some rivalry moments as you're growing up from these series, over the past 20 plus years or something like that, however long you've been a fan. I know Brian's a Cardinal obsession, but he's technically only been a fan for like a decade and a half, probably. Maybe a little more. About? But I mean, I've only been a fan for 3 or 4 years, so it's not like I have anything.
Put me in that. I mean, I've been a Cardinals fan, even though I didn't live in St. Louis. I've been a Cardinals fan a lot longer.
Okay, that's fair. I'll take everything back.
You want me to start?
I'll start off with a specific one just because I do actually have this core memory. I remember when I remember the 1998 chase. I remember number 62, and I remember number 70. Number 70 didn't happen against the Cubs, but number 62 did. I was in Sunday school church because I was a little kid. And I remember my dad calling in, and he came and picked me up from church after it happened to come take me home so we could watch the rest of the game. I wasn't into baseball like I was now, but I do have that core memory of like that was a big deal in in St. Louis, in the area that I was growing up in.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, as funny as it sounds, though, that's probably one of my core memories. Obviously, I date myself a little bit, but 98, I'm 18 years old, and you're watching baseball really kind of surge at that point, and you have on both sides, you've got Mark McGwire, and then for the Cubs side, you've got Sammy Sosa in the middle of that. And for McGwire to break the record for 62 at that point against the Cubs was just like, it was perfect in that world if you were a Cardinals fan. I'm sure if you're a Cubs fan, you're kind of like, we enjoy the moment, but did it have to really be against us? But and what was crazy about it was, for me, is like Mark McGwire, he hit it, and it wasn't this towering moonshot of a drive like he normally would hit. It was just that low line drive that barely got over the wall, but it was enough to get over. And like just seeing him run around the bases, them kind of pausing, even, a lot of credit to Sammy Sosa in that, taking the time, to acknowledge what McGwire did, I think was just a class act on that as well. Kind of made that, and that's probably one of the biggest. Now there are a lot of like memories that I have, but I can't say for me personally, because like you talk about, like when you start to look at the history of the Cardinals Cubs, there's so many great things. I mean, whether it's the Lou Brock trade, which Michael, that probably still haunts the Cubs in a lot of ways, but that was before our time. All of those fun things. For me though, like some of the more recent fun would be like, last year's kind of benches clearing little brawl with Contreras when he got hit, like seeing that like intensity kind of come back, right? Like those are the fun ones. I mean, even, in, July, we're getting ready. We were just talking about it kind of off, it always seems like here recently the Cardinals are in Wrigley around the 4th of July. And like last year when Pozo with the big comeback and he hit that 3-run bomb that was just gone. And
that was going to be one of mine.
Yeah, those things, like, it's just been like, those things are fun. And, obviously I'm going to lean to the Cardinal moments, but I think like even when you look at this series, like you're going to remember the big swing off of PCA's bat from last night, and that might be one of Michael's, even though it happened just last night. I mean, it's just like, those type of responses and swings back and forth. I mean, we can go back to Pujols' day, and just about any time he played the Cubs, he just showed up. Or you talk about Matt Carpenter, all of those guys, just like Happ and Bush are Cardinal killers. You got the unsung heroes like Pozo, and then Matt Carpenter, who just seemed to annihilate the Cubs in those years.
Yeah, that's I would say the one that I'm going to go to would be Kyle Schwarber's 2015 mammoth home run in the NLDS. I mean, that's I've been a Cubs fan since I was about 4 years old. Took a lot of beatings for most of my life. Not to date you boys, but I was a year old during the 98 chase. And so I don't really remember it. Love watching, going back, watching the summer of 98, ESPN thing. But, that Kyle Schwarber moment, that was like a huge, like, okay, the Cubs are legitimate now. Like we just knocked out the Cardinals out of the playoffs. And obviously the Cardinals were elite that year. Well, really the Cubs, Cardinals and Pirates were all elite that year. But that to me was kind of the signaling of the changing of the guard truly happening at that time. And, because regular season, it doesn't matter. Like it seems like a lot of years, it's pretty close between the two teams. But that year, Cubs started to find some more wins, and then, finally found the big one that night. And it's kind of cool. They still have that ball underneath protective like plexiglass up there on top of the scoreboard there at Wrigley. And
no way, that's so cool.
That's electric. And it's like I was listening, so shout out to the Lovable Reunion podcast that Anthony Rizzo and David Ross are doing right now, interviewing all the 2016 guys. And he went through that with Kyle Schwarber, and he's like, there's been a lot of like really cool moments. I've hit a lot of big home runs, and they're like, yeah, you've hit 28 home runs in the playoffs in your career. Like you found the benches a couple times. And he's like, yeah, he's like, but that one, he's like, to have a home run ball at such a historic field, like saved in its place, he's like, that one's different. And I was like, yeah, that's a fact. And it's been really funny listening to that podcast because of they've talked about the Cardinals Cubs moments, and they said, prior to when we started winning games a lot, the Cardinals guys, they'd come into the weight room, and stuff, and they'd be laughing, cracking jokes with our guys, and everybody's just having a good time. And then we started beating the Cardinals, and those guys stopped showing up for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you win for so long when the other team's losing, and they start getting a little bit of a sore loser mentality.
100%, 100%.
For sure.
So, yeah,
one of the small ones for me is obviously the Yoel Pozo thing is a little bit related to the calls. Like Chip Carey's call of that last year was just like, Yoel Pozo has just left the building thing. But last year when I think it was a day game, the whole call of PCA forgot how many outs there were. It was during the second half when his slump happened. So it was like these little moments that egged on and kind of like put, started stacking on each other because, he had the historic MVP first half, then fell off like crazy. And then again, going with the call, it wouldn't be the same, I think, if I was there at all because you didn't get to hear Chip Carey's call. And I'm not like, I think Chip Carey is awesome, but I'm not like a homer for Carey. But some of those calls have been really funny. And that whole like PCA forgot how many outs there were, couldn't make it in, and it was a really, really funny. It was a really funny moment.
Yeah. No, I love that moment too, and not just the hate on PCA. It was just, it's just when you have those moments, they are funny. And then obviously Mason Wynn coming around from second, tagging up from second to score. You just don't see that in MLB often, so it makes it memorable. Michael, I don't know how much you remember about like just Yachty and Carlos Zambrano's, like they just did not like each other and their heated exchanges at the dish. I mean, we know Yachty, if you've been in St. Louis long enough, he's not going to shy away from anybody. Like that passion is there. And so like I can go back and just remember just watching games and like it's Cardinals Cubs and at some point Yachty's going to get in the face of somebody and then all of a sudden, there's going to be at least a few extra people coming from the bullpens and everywhere else to figure it out. And so like I'm hopeful, I should say, that that's what we're getting back to because I think, some of the unfortunate side of it is like it seems as of recent, most of the time it's either one team's really down while the other team's really good or vice versa. And rivalry's still rivalry. We know records go out the window when the Cardinals and Cubs get together. It doesn't matter what type of season either is having. They show up for those games. My Lord, is it so much fun when they're both fighting for something.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, you bring up the Zambrano is like those days. The Cubs actually weren't bad during that stretch. Like Carlos Zambrano was routinely within that top 10 Cy Young running every year. Derek Lee was electric. Aramis Ramirez was incredible. Soriano, like they actually had some good players, but the Cardinals big brothered the Cubs for sure during that time. And so it's like Zambrano, he was always a hothead, but it was always fun watching him and Yachty beef with one another because it just felt a little different during those moments. And I think my favorite thing I found out about Zambrano post-career is the fact that he became a preacher. down in his home country afterwards, and I was like, that's fantastic. It's like, Tim, I don't know how much you followed the Cardinals during that time, but like Zambrano was he was one of the few guys in the league that probably could match Yachty's energy when it comes to just like
100%.
losing his temper and stuff. And it was like during that time frame, if you would have told me he was going to grow up and, finish his career and end up becoming a preacher, I'd have been like, there's not a chance. No way. But I think another core memory for me was actually a sad one. Was I came in 2021 and watched the Cubs play right before the trade deadline here in St. Louis, and everybody knew the boys were gone, and just watching like Chris Bryant and Rizzo and Baez down in the dugout, like talking with the other guys and stuff, like. Boys, like, it brought me to tears watching it happen. It was just, it was a brutal moment, but it was like, it was also, you still watch them ready to play baseball. Like, those guys still prepared, the constant professionals. I think Chris Bryant was hurt during that game, so he wasn't playing, but, shocker, Chris Bryant was hurt. But Baez and, like, Rizzo and those guys, like, just constant professionals during that time, and still went out there, had beef with the Cardinals, played the game the right way. But, like I said, the 5-year-old Michael sitting there was watching his favorite players from, the team that, finally got it done. And it was heartbreaking, especially knowing it. Not only were we going to for sure be losing at least one or two of those guys, we were probably losing all of them. And I think it would have made it so much worse if you guys would have told me that ultimately Wilson Contreras would have left and joined the Cardinals of all teams. I think I might have just lost everything at that moment, but thankfully I didn't know at that time.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. It's always historic and always something fun to talk about. Like you said, Brian, I think this rivalry is probably second most historic to the Yankees and the Red Sox. It means a lot, and it's always fun. We hate each other, but at the same time, we know it's a big deal. Just like when McGuire hit that 62, and Sammy Sosa just comes running out in the outfield, and McGuire was able to stop at every base and give a hug, and the Cubs were, giving him handshakes and high five that whole time too. Which, on a side note, if you think about it, that would never be able to happen in today's game because pitch clock.
They would if it's a record like that, baby. The pitch clock's going out the window for that at bat. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's true. All right, let's move on. The last thing we want to talk about, we're going to go over the CBA talks. So both the MLB themselves and the Players Association came out with proposals for the CBA, and I thought it'd be good to kind of just talk about, bring our perspectives and our thoughts. And a big thing for it is kind of slow down the hyperbole of like baseball is going to be over, because there's a chance it could be canceled, but there's also a big chance that it doesn't be. What's real, what's expected, and we're just going to kind of dissect our thoughts. So first, I'm going to give you guys, and I know you know this, but to just give everybody that kind of two proposals, lay it out, and then we can kind of talk about it. So first, the Players Association came out first, and said that they're proposing a few different pieces, none of which have to do with a cap or a cap of any sorts.
Right.
But they are proposing a floor of $150 million, and then some sort of tax they're calling a competitive integrity tax for any team that doesn't hit that. So it's kind of the reverse of what's happening right now, whereas, when a team hits the first tax threshold, their dollar starts to diminish. $1 is equal to $1.2. It'd probably happen in reverse, whereas if, they're not spending up to that floor point, their dollars are not gonna go as far. And they're proposing a change in the revenue sharing system. So money from the TV revenues would be shared within players, which is an important piece. The increased in minimum salary from $780,000 to $1.5 million. So the current minimum MLB player base salary that happens on the 40-man roster is currently 780. So they're proposing that change to 1.5 million.
Yeah, they got to
And
get with inflation.
Yeah. The other big thing I would say that is a big point from their proposal is free agency to start. If you are 30, let's see, free agency for
So
players
allow players
who are
with 5 or
30
more
and
years?
above. Yeah,
Yeah.
is a 5-year service time instead of 6. So they gain a year of service time in that. The one thing I'll say before I go MLBs, this negotiation all starts and stops with the players. They are kind of I would say the agree or disagree point, because MLB is the one who runs the league. The players can say, we don't want to participate, so we're going to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Second piece and then we can get started talking. MLB came out with a counter proposal, or just a proposal of their own, said that they're proposing a cap and a floor, which I want to note the floor is an important piece because they didn't have to propose a floor. But they're proposing a salary floor of 171.2 million, and then a cap of 245.3 million. And then the other piece of it is to take revenue and to increase revenue sharing for everything to be 50-50. So 50 for the team and 50 for the other teams. So with that being said, what are your guys' thoughts from the thing? Kind of generic thought through, and then we can just dissect some more pieces. Let's have you go first, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me, I don't think anything was a big surprise. I mean, I think from the players, the idea of the competitive balance tax or whatever they want to call it, I think kind of was an interesting dynamic because it's their way of trying to create a floor. Obviously, they don't necessarily want these hard caps, if you will, because then that's going to limit the amount of money players can ultimately get. So they're trying to find, the balance in between. So you can't have like what you would consider in some other professional sports where you have this hard cap where you cannot as a team go over this because it will limit the amount of money that they can spend. And of course, on the MLB side, I think you hit it the best for me was the floor. Like, I did not anticipate a world in which I would have seen from the MLB that they would have considered a floor. And something you didn't mention, but I think is huge if you're a baseball fan listening in, and we can maybe talk about it a little bit more, was the media rights aspect too that MLB offered, where it could essentially eliminate blackouts, which I know is a headache for a lot of fans, because right now you could be watching and think you're going to get your local team and you don't. So like some of those things are big. To me, I loved from the players the 5 years, and then they become basically free agents after that if they're not already, under contract of some sort. Like, obviously it's not going to change some of the contracts. To me, neither of these seem like outrageous, but obviously it's going to probably land somewhere in the middle, right? Like, I don't anticipate agreement on either side. To me, I look at this and go, these are two very good starting points from both sides to at least bring them together to figure out what it's ultimately going to be. For me, I think the best thing of all of this, it's at least giving me hope that there won't be a lockout, because when I look at both of these, yes, there's some disagreements. Yes, there's going to be some things that probably need to be adjusted, but they're not that far off. Like, when I start looking at the main points of all of this, I don't think they're that far off. And I can commend the owners slightly, because typically the owners talk about being the greedy, they're always out there. And rightfully so, they're trying to make money. Like, I'm not trying to minimize that. If I was an owner, I'd want to make money too versus losing it. But like, even the notion of guaranteed contracts, like all contracts moving forward are guaranteed. Like, that's a big, risk as far as from an ownership standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all unfolds. I would like to see maybe a little bit more talk, and maybe this will come as they get together. Just some ways to balance out the teams, not just payroll wise. And what I mean by that is not just a floor in that, but like create some sort of competitiveness where if you fall below a certain threshold for multiple years in a row, you can't guarantee a high, like above a certain level draft pick. You know, just because then you can't have these lower level teams or, you know, uncompetitive teams, if you will, just stock these high talent after talent and then end up just trading them away, you know, to the best teams, to the Dodgers, to the, you know, to the Yankees. I think it would create a little bit more parity within the draft. And again, drafting is always such a hard thing because you can be sure on a player that never develops.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how, I haven't quite figured that out completely yet, but I kind of like what the players are on and in regards to figuring out a little bit different way to do the draft, getting rid of qualifying offers. I know some of our least favorite things I would like to see them potentially get rid of as well as like arbitration. Like I'd like to see them just say, hey, let's be done with arbitration and figure out a different system.
Yeah, that's good. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I kind of like you, Brian. One of the really surprising things for me was the MLB actually coming out and setting the floor as well. I don't think many of us expected that piece, especially out the gate, but I think it is very important. And it's like talking to some of my friends and some of the people that I would say are a little bit more casual of baseball fans. You know, they see the Dodgers and the Yankees spending all this money, and they're like, "We got to have a salary cap." And I've tried to educate them from my point of view and kind of our point of view is like that's not the only issue. Like a salary floor is also
Right.
a necessity at this point because it's like some of the pieces you've brought up with the draft and things like that. Like with all those different pieces not currently in place, it's allowing some of these teams just to continue to be bottom feeder teams, and it's not good for baseball, in my opinion, when that's happening. You know, watching Pittsburgh get all these great young players and then ultimately just trade them away. Once again from that podcast, they talked about the wild card game in 2015. The Pirates, they said that may have been the loudest stadium that those guys have ever played in. They said the Pirates fans deserve to have a good team out there to watch. And it is frustrating as a fan to see some of these teams continuously every year, kind of hang down in there. So I think that was an important step that both sides already had that in their forefront to propose that. The blackout piece, I think, is huge. For especially folks that are more casual fans, like if you, as a Cubs fan, there has been several times living here in St. Louis even that I've had games blacked out that I'm going, why am I not able to watch this game? This is a Cardinals, local broadcast area, not Chicago's. Why is this getting blacked out here? And just in general, I feel like the MLB has taken a lot of really great steps towards bringing more fans in. To me, that is one of the ultimate ways to bring fans in is making it available to watch the games. And so it's just really atrocious to me to even do that to your fans is to make it not available to watch all these games. And, it really hurts them. I think the draft piece, I think, is huge as well to kind of keep that balance within things. Like you said, you can't control things always, but with having pieces like a floor, a cap, and having that draft piece in place, I think that'll go a long ways in making baseball as a whole competitive across the landscape. You're not going to see as many of these teams that are just like perennial, this is the best teams, perennial, these are the worst teams. It'll add more teams that you're not necessarily used to seeing in the playoffs. You'll see a little bit more fluctuation. Yes, of course, some organizations are still just better at the overall drafting, bringing players up
Right.
and being willing to go spend money, i.e. the Dodgers. But as a whole, you're going to see some of these teams actually willing to go spend money because truthfully, I think, we're all sitting here watching the A's right now going, that offense is competitive enough to go do things right now if they had the pitching staff in place to go do it. But they don't want to go spend money because they've got all these young guys right now that they were smart, got them on smaller contracts early on. But, if Luis Severino's your big free agent signee as a pitcher, that's not, huge. If you go sign a couple of these other big name, pitchers, if they could have nailed down one of those guys the Dodgers got, the A's are probably going to win that division if they had another pitcher with the way that the West is kind of playing right now. But with the way that their staff looks and things like that, still a pretty good shot Seattle ends up walking out of that division just because ultimately they have the deepest overall team. But like I said, you get teams like that, the Colorados, the Angels, much to their credit, though, they have tried to spend money over the years, just in all the wrong places. But they,
they're just not
once
good at
again,
it.
have traded away several really good or DFA'd great young players that end up developing elsewhere. So I would say that's what I took from that. The players piece, I'm really interested to see what they think or where the MLB and them lands with the starting salary and where ultimately they land on things like arbitration. Because I'm like you, Brian, I'd like to see that. I don't know how exactly that changes, but I think with some of what they're discussing is going to ultimately push towards that. Because if they're going to allow guaranteed contracts for everybody and all that money being guaranteed, they're going to have to change the way they're working other pieces of the contracts out. So to me, that points towards they're going to end up changing the arbitration system at some point. But I do think it's a good step in the right direction that we're not coming in and both sides are so far apart that we don't see any consistencies between either side of the list. I think that they're close enough that hopefully, obviously, we don't get to a lockout, but I think that we're close enough that we're not going to see, like Tim kind of alluded to, this major shift in baseball in all the worst ways.
Right.
I think that it's just going to add a nice competitive piece to things, ultimately just making the game better.
Yeah, those are all really good. So I want to touch on the cap floor piece because like you guys said, it was a really important point that the owners decided to say, hey, we are going to have a floor in this. The one piece I want to add to it is that those floor and cap numbers include benefits as well. So it's not just payroll dollars. It includes all the benefits that come with it. The math was done that would make the salary floor piece like 140 million or so, which is kind of low. Because if you think of right now, let's just use for instance the Cardinals. This year they're rebuilding. Their salary number is at 94, which is only a 30 or 40 from that. But it is important to note that their first presentation included that because it kind of shifts and signals like, hey, they know they're not the favorite party in this instance.
Right.
The second piece that I thought was a big deal to really, really think about is the owners have everything to lose in all of this. The owners care about one thing, and it's their franchise value, which they're a business owner. The whole point of what they do is to increase the profit of their business. Now, baseball being good and your team being good is good for your business. And the players know that. Something to note, too, I think that's important in all of this is the last sport that doesn't have a cap. This is a very player-run league in comparison to all the other sports where caps and floors exist. And the players' union and the players themselves are probably going to go to death to not let that happen. Right. So, in my mind, from this, if the players are going to agree to a cap, it's going to have to be higher, or they're going to have to get really insane benefits that are worth giving up the cap. Because if you think about it from, just like a generic labor versus business point of view, step number one in negotiation is to keep, for an ownership to keep to cap their labors from making more than they want them to make. So, an ownership or a boss has more power than that, and the players are not gonna they're not gonna do that. And again, I just go back to owners have everything to lose in that, because if the baseball season tanks, it is the best it's ever been right now. The last time a cap was proposed was 1994, and there was no baseball season in 1994. And the only thing that saved that, and the only thing that saved the game, was the 1998 summer.
Right.
So the ownership group and the commissioner have to be really, really careful in threading this, because they've got one shot, or they're gonna lose.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that, but where I will push back to is the players are going to lose big too in that, because if there is no baseball, then there's no money for them either.
100%.
And so, like, that's why I think there will be, kind of, again, the middle. I understand from the player's perspective, you don't want a hard cap, because then, yes, it does limit what ownership is willing to pay per player. So it does decrease the value. But the beauty in all of that is it will also, I think, create not these insanely long contracts anymore, where you don't get these 10, 13, 15-year deals, because these players can know they could potentially make more money in shorter term deals, right? Essentially, they start betting on themselves a little bit. I'll sign a 3-year deal and then revisit free agency, and vice versa. I think the bigger component from the players' side, and I'll be interested to see where the owners fall on this, is that free agency piece. That if you have 5 years of service time, you go automatically to free agency unless you sign an extension of some sort, because that's going to force a lot of these smaller market teams to make some big decisions. Because you look at like someone like Pittsburgh, I know we've been using them a lot. Paul Skeens would be coming up on that like very quickly, and they would have to do something about that, or they're going to get no value out of him whatsoever. And so I think it does create an opportunity, in my opinion, where some of these smaller market teams can retain some of their high quality players for longer periods of time. Am I in favor of a salary cap? I go back and forth. I like it on some levels, because then at least that a team's not going to be able to go out there like the Dodgers in a sense and just say, hey, we're going to give everybody $30 million. But to give LA a lot of credit, they have a very smart front office. Like they're doing things right, and they're creating ways to create, in our estimation, these all-star-esque teams on the field. And I think you're gonna have to see some other teams kind of step up in that. Not necessarily be the Dodgers, but you're gonna have to get creative in ways that you keep your players. And that's what I think all of this kind of starts to generate is I think it puts a little bit more ownership on the front offices, having to figure out, when you start to implement a floor, they have to all of a sudden have to be a little bit smarter. They can't just say, hey, we've got one good player now, we'll just sell him off and retool with 8 pieces, and we'll only be at a $60,000 or $60 million payroll, and we can bank the rest of the money. Now they have to be kind of smart and intelligent. They can sell off those pieces, but they're still going to have to spend the money in other ways, which is going to be a benefit to the players. Because again, when you look at this stuff, and then I'll stop talking, is we always focus on the highs of highs, like the peak players that make all kinds of money. And then the players at the bottom that are the rookies and those that just don't have the service time. So they're not building up, a lot of money in the bank. And we forget about the middling players, which are the glue of a lot of these teams that aren't making hardly any money. They're making the $1 to $4 million, but they're critical for these teams. I mean, a key example of this was up until this year, like Nico Horner for the Cubs, right? He wasn't making a lot of money. Now they recognize what he did, and kudos to the Cubs for paying the man, because he deserved it. But you have a lot of players that fall into that. And this, I think, will help increase some of those mid-tier players to get a little bit more of a pay bump. The elite players are going to get paid regardless. And then I think you do have to find a way to balance this out so teams can't keep kids for 8-9 years without having to sign them to an extension of some sort.
Yeah. So one thing, and then I'll let you go, Michael. I wanted to add to this is the revenue piece that the owners have presented, because I think this is really, really worth thinking about. Let's just say Steinbrenner, the Dodgers, Steve Cohen have decided that giving up 50% of their revenue is worth it to get a cap on spending, which is a really interesting thing to think about, because if you think about the owners, what do they care about the most? Franchise value. Now, Steve Cohen's an owner in the sense of like he wants to win. He has said, like there's nothing I want more than to see the Mets win the World Series. The Dodgers have shown they want to win. It's really good for business. Shohei Ohtani is really good for business, but it's Steinbrenner, all of those guys. It is interesting to really think about, like, they're willing to give up, the Dodgers are willing to give up way more of their TV revenue money to have a cap in place, which is a really interesting thought, because I think their proposal tends to favor fans in the sense of like get them on board with their side, because this is it's side versus side. These two aren't in it for the interest of baseball. It's side versus side. But so I'm not cautioning one side or the other. I'm just trying to lay out as much information and thinking through as this, to not just like this is the best way to go. But owners who care about revenue care about value have said it's worth it to give money away to the Marlins instead of spending more than $245 million on players. And the last note, just to remember that in order for a proposal to be agreed upon on either side, 23 of the 30 members have to vote. So 23 owners have to in agreement. So that means 7 don't have to agree. 23 players of the 30 have to agree, or 7 disagree. Sorry, Michael, go ahead if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think what you just said is very interesting. Truthfully, because I hadn't really thought about that a whole lot from that side of things. I would say kind of my perspective on that piece is it's interesting, like you said, who that would be coming from as well, because the Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, those people right now, those are the teams that all these fans hate, because they're like, well, they just can spend however much money they want to spend and everything to make their team so much better. But if those guys are willing to say, actually, I'm willing to put a cap on things, and I don't have to go spend much more money than everybody else because it's going to make me more money on the back end, the way this is going to work out. Realistically, I'm like, actually, that's rather interesting, because you would think you would see, realistically, I would think of 10 to 15 teams that we see that are willing to spend money that honestly would want that salary cap to be pretty high. Like astronomically high if there was any cap, rather than that piece. But that's kind of an that's one of those where you get a contract, and that's the interesting, like, this is actually the piece that's going to hold everything up. Because the players, is that where their folks come in and go, they're trying to get cute here. There's something on this side of things that I don't really like. I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. So that's pretty an interesting piece. The one other thing I guess I would hit on is I don't know that I would be in favor for a full hard cap on things. I would be more in favor to what the NBA does, where they have a tiered system for being above the cap. If you're above the cap, there's, obviously this, everybody does it, but the luxury tax above it. And then they have a second tier. If you're above this, you get taxed even more, but I will say most of those teams stay competitive when those teams are above that. So that's it. Ultimately for me, I'm all about the competitive side of baseball. You pay the guys whatever. I don't care if they're making $100 million a year. If they're putting out great baseball and you have the money to pay those players, great. Sounds good. As long as it's good for the fans, it's good for baseball, I'm in.
So I just want to, I know I'm picking on ownership group, and it's not me picking one side or the other, but it's just an interesting like statistic to add to it. But if we're just going to take the Yankees, which is the most valuable sports franchise in America, they are valued at 8.5 billion as of March 2026. Their revenue last year was $710 million. So in this system, say they brought in the same amount of money, which it's going to go up because just inflation always increases. They are going to bring in $710 million next year. And if the cap was in place, they only have to spend 245 of that to their, for their playership at a max, at least 171, which means 50% of that's also going to go to the rest of the league. The Yankees are going to pocket more money with that system than they would now, having to spend whatever they want. And I'm not saying that's good or bad or yes, no, maybe so, because the Marlins are going to end up getting a lot of that. And again, Steinbrenner is saying that's worth it more for my franchise value than to do what we have now. And yeah, it's an interesting case. We're not going to know what's going to happen for another year.
Yeah.
It doesn't expire until December 1st at the end of the year, which means that's when a lockout has to be decided or a new agreement has to be made. So all of this is going to keep happening for the rest of the year. But again, I just think it is an interesting fact that the ownership side is deciding this is worth proposing right out of the gate, because first proposals are never win over the other. It's going to take time and going to keep going. And the players are going to have to at some point agree to, like you said, Brian, or they're not going to make any money, because if the owners, if they get locked out, they don't get paid.
Right.
They're sitting at home on, in their living room, ready to play, not getting any money. But that means the ownership group's also not making any money.
Yeah.
Brian, you look like you have some thoughts.
No, it's just an interesting dynamic because, obviously I think we're all smart enough, and I think everybody listening is smart enough to understand when it comes to this, there's not a 50-50 perfect split world where both sides are going to be able to get what they want to get out of this. There's going to be a lot of give and take on both sides. And again, if you're listening and you hear Tim talk about like the owners locking out the players, and you're going, oh, big whoop for the guys that, already got their $30 million guaranteed money. They can go home and sit for, a year and not really feel it. And you're right in some aspects. Sure, those guys can. But there are a lot of guys that can't afford that. And I think some of the times where it gets hurt and where it starts to a lot of times we don't think about is it's not just the MLB players, but it's also the prospects. It's the minor leagues that eventually start to get really kind of affected. And for baseball, like you talk about, the Yankees, again, $710 million, in the course of the year. They don't get to pocket all of that money because they have to go back into their farm systems. And sure, their systems are making money too. Like, it's not just simplistic on that side of it. I mean, you've got staffing, you've got potential renting. None of that changes. They're doing that this year and still making their money. So it will be interesting to see. Again, this is the starting point, which to my surprise, and I said it earlier, they're much closer than I anticipated the first wave of proposals to be. And so I'll be interested to see what adjustments come, and probably, let's say early July, we might see the second wave of proposals that kind of hits the media market, and we'll kind of see if there's any give or take one side or the other, or if they're both totally going to say, no, we're going to lock in with our first proposal until we get further into the season.
Yeah. All right, fellas, any last thoughts before we shut her down?
Hey, let's go Cards. I need a big night from Jordan Walker. We talked about memories in rivalry games. It's right now.
Go, Cubs,
Michael,
go.
you can have a last thought. Right on. Well, we appreciate you guys. Like we said before, this is just kind of like to lay out as much information as possible and to just, give everybody information. They can decide what they think, what they should do, what they think about it. Number one, for everybody, we just want this sport to continue because it's a beautiful game, and it's in the best state and best place that it's been. I think it's an entire lifetime. So, wherever you go, whatever you can do. Give us some comments down in that section down there. Let us know your thoughts. Maybe some Cubs cards, rivalry moments, or if you happen to be a fan of a different team, rivalry moment of yours. Let us know your thoughts about the all this CBA stuff. What you think's going to happen, or your emotions going into it. But we appreciate you guys for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.